So we are here in Los Angeles, but not everyone here is in Los Angeles. uh, Les is down Oceanside, I think, and Mark is in Michigan, where the leaves are gorgeous, orange and yellow, and all the fall colors advertising their transition into winter. But we started briefly in a discussion, and one of the points was that when it comes to mentally obsessive thinking, if I make believe my thinking is the sole source of my reality, I am obsessed with thinking more and more and more and more about what I call reality, which in fact it's not reality at all. It's just a supposition of reality. And one of the transitions Les and I talked briefly about this morning is starting to notice that if understanding is a baseline to reason, and I've been thinking unreasonably, then I've been thinking that understanding is actually misunderstanding. I've been using a misunderstanding as the basis of my understanding. And that can seem very difficult to have any perspective on, except to the fact that the inner conflict and mental anguish and emotional turmoil all is evidence that something's destabilized in my thinking. But the point this morning was that this attempt to understand an absolute source is unnecessary, because the idea, I'm going to wait for Gabe to come in. He's pulling in the garage. Morning, Gabe. So the attempt to understand an absolute source in rational terms would suggest that rational terms are capable of understanding something that would be beyond all limits. And rational limits are natural in a process that changes. Thinking is a process that changes. The understanding we have changes. But if we understand one element, which is that an absolute source is absolute, doesn't rely on our thinking, then our thinking starts to function on a basis that's absolute and stable and all-knowing and always present and always available, rather than think of it as something I need to come to an understanding of, start to see that it's actually providing to me. It's actually giving to me those things, rather than I am doing something to get those things. If I'm thinking of it as something I can get more or less of, that I have to do more to get and have, I'm thinking of it as rational rather than something that does not exist within the rational realm. And intuition, by definition, is knowledge beyond reason, meaning there's no reason in it at all, meaning there's no understanding in it. It's just an absolute omniscient state of knowing and being. So the difference is I'm either producing it by meditating, running, working out, eating better, doing all these things because I feel better and thinking now I have a relationship to it, which means, once again, that it's my thinking that's doing it. So I'm still stuck in that loop, rather than say, it is the absolute nature of nature. It is the nature of my ability to have any understanding whatsoever. And if that is the case, it's probably worth mentioning or
Good.
considering. Good morning, Linces.
Hello, Jack. Hello, everyone.
Effervescence has arrived.
Uh-huh.
So the difference is, one is in on the top of page 85, it talks about neutrality in the big book. And it says it's as though we're taken to that place of neutrality, meaning it's not being done by us at all. We don't need to swear off alcohol. There's a sense of freedom that comes naturally with the resignation and the concession that there is a power greater than myself, and what myself is made up of are rational thoughts about what I think and who I think I am and how I think I am. That doesn't make who I am those thoughts. It makes what I do with those thoughts imagine. I can imagine I am what those thoughts say and mean, but that's just, again, imagination. It isn't reality. It's just an idea about my thinking.
Mhm.
So do you see that if I made the distinction clear? I feel a little muddy in the words.
You were clear.
Thanks.
I understand. Mhm.
Well, that's kind of the point right there. The difference between understanding and knowing.
Yes.
Mhm.
So the clear,
I posited that as if I understood and knew what I was saying, but I was hoping for an explanation and a clarity from you on that, Jack.
but let's say that omniscient source, that absolute source, is all knowing, which has been talked about for eons now, or thousands of years. If it's all knowing, then that's our source. It doesn't mean we need to think it's our source, and it doesn't mean we need to think of it in identical terms to it, because it doesn't need our thinking. It is not contingent on our thoughts. Our thoughts are contingent on it. So if I think I'm having a spiritual experience that I've created and I'm feeling better about that relationship, that's all being done within my rational thinking, versus beginning to see that no matter how I feel, I still have the relationship because it's absolute and
Wow.
it's unlimited and it isn't in conflict and it isn't coming or going and it can't be lost, so it can't be found. And all of the words I use start to fall apart because that ever-present nature would just simply be the ever-present nature of nature, our nature. And I'm not talking about nature as the plants and minerals and animals. I'm talking about the subatomic level, the levels that we don't think we see, that are imperative to existence. As a matter of fact, the existence we see is absolutely based on that invisibility. So the fact that we can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The same way that this idea that a spiritual world needs to be seen by us and understood by us before we can agree to it is somewhat pompous to make believe that thinking again is the creator of it, rather than see that thinking was actually produced by it. Our consciousness is possible. We are life forms living in a universe that has been operating for some time, it appears, with some history of process and evolution and change that's occurred. And we right now are in a moment that has never been lived by anyone before.
Mhm.
And in one respect, it's brand new, but the fact that it's brand new in another respect is the same thing it's always been. It's always been brand new. So it sort of contradicts some of the ideas we have about new versus old, because when something's always new, there's nothing old in it. And it sort of reveals, in my experience, that this isn't a time space bound experience that we're having in the present. We can think of it in time and space bound ways because our bodies are designed to do that, to consider and contemplate and observe and conclude and make decisions and choices based on survival instinct, wanting to grow, wanting to develop, wanting to eat, wanting to flourish, wanting to be healthy.
Mhm.
Organisms tend to thrive to survive.
You
They
forgot
survive to thrive.
procreate, Jack.
Procreation, yes. So the one thing we can do is create babies. But if you think about the complexity as what that involves, clearly there's some understanding that's well beyond our understanding, because what we do is very, very simple, driven by feelings largely,
Mhm.
to reach a point at which we can consummate a child. But think of all of the trillions and trillions of chemical interactions that go into that simple act
Yes.
that
And
we
so-
don't think about at all,
No.
except in the most superficial manner.
Exactly. Wow. Whew.
So if it's happening in an infinite realm, and I would say there's really nothing happening in an infinite realm, it's just an absolute state of present, pure consciousness. And the original absolutes of the Oxford group, which came out of the Washingtonians back in the late 1800s, were purity, meaning undiluted, inalterable, inviolable, immutable, indivisible, purity, absolute purity. So there's consciousness. Unselfishness, meaning not the view of the thinking of itself as ourself, not this self-seeming centered idea, which isn't really self-centered, it's thought-centered. Thinking about thinking itself creates more thoughts about thoughts. So what's centered in thoughts, thinking about thoughts, is thoughts themselves, not ourselves, not myself, not yourself. We have operated on the basis that that becomes who we are, which it isn't. It's just a thought about who we are. It's a how and a what that we're applying, what we think, how we think of it. And to think of those thoughts creating us is to think we're the creators of reality. And to think I am the creator of reality is to say there is no other God before me. Exactly what the Bible says is one of the greatest sins. I think, Gabe, you said yesterday that was the fourth deadly sin, have no other gods before me.
Yeah, and also jealousy and spiteful, and I am a jealous God. So.
Yeah. So I would say, even within the context of the ideas we've had historically about God, it's basically been a human creation, because we've been thinking of our thinking as sacred. We've been thinking about that God we imagine is sacred, and yet that God seems to contain a lot of human characteristics that are very, very noticeable: vengeful, hateful, spiteful, contemptful. So we have now imbued a loving absolute source that doesn't change with the attributes that we want to claim we don't have, because we don't want to feel the guilt we're having, the shame we're having is literally being guilty for making believe that fantasy is reality and we're the creators of it. And what I need to do is find God. As though God's missing. What's missing is the substance in my own thinking about God that gives me the impression that God is somewhere else.
Jack,
And
if I may.
Yeah, please.
This is the New International Version, Exodus 24-6. I am the Lord your God. I am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. So your kids' will be punished. So it's just sort of insane to think that way. I don't know.
Well, and historically, we have looked at our thinking as reality. And to think that is to think we're God. Now, if it's taken this long to even begin to have that conversation openly, and I don't think it's really taken this long, because through history, people have talked about the fact that we are not our thoughts. Gurus and Maharajis and seers and seekers and whatever the sum total of all those people are that have worn turbans and sit in lotus positions and act monastically or quietly or meditatively and speak about those things.
Thank
have
God.
often
Thank God, because if you got, in trouble for thinking murder, I'd be, thank God we're not held accountable for our thoughts like that.
Well, and at the same time, we're also witnessing those murders based on those thoughts that the person committing it has the right and is righteous to do it because their thinking has given them the rationalization that that other person has to go. And all that's typically happening is it's a conflict of thinking. It's not a conflict. It's not an actual conflict in reality. It's just a summation of thought that determines that guy, that person. This is the right thing to do. It may be insane, but it's the right thing. And it's typically thought to be the only thing, exactly what addiction is when it comes to drinking or drugs or gambling or sex or food or whatever the addiction is. The addictions we have limited to thinking of as addictive are thousands and thousands in terms of numbers, because it's anything we attach to give ourselves the impression that if we had it, we would be better than we are where we are now. Whatever it is, somebody's admiration, somebody's attention, my car getting washed, having better paint, a bigger house, all of it is all tied into this scarcity of thought, looking to be fulfilled by doing things that fill a void that doesn't address the problem. So it's all
God-sized void.
What's that?
A God-sized void.
Yeah. And what's interesting too about that is when you're dealing in an infinite realm, there's no size to it at all. You're going dimensionless now, meaning there's no limit, there's no bounds, there's no chance for contempt because there's nothing contemptible about it. There's no conflict, there's no lie because it's pure, it's absolute, it isn't changing. So whatever it is now, it always is whenever we seem to witness it. It's always here now for us, but it isn't here and now for that essence because that essence isn't in time and space. It's not part of this realm that we're dealing with. That's what makes this sort of God complex seemingly complex when we try to think of it in relative human terms, where our brains are really designed to function within this experience we're having, with this world we're in, this seeming relative world. It doesn't mean that that's the absolute nature of nature. It simply means that's the absolute nature of our body and our ability to function productively, usefully, and wholly within this experience we're having. And what would that mean? Having more than I need so I can help others. I don't have the pressure and the desperation of starving or suffocating for air. If I'm suffocating, I don't have much thought of others. I'm consumed with thought about my own experience to try to save this body I'm responsible for. And that goes for money, starvation, suffocation with money and relationship, all that kind of stuff. Morning, Harry. Morning, Everett.
Good morning. Good morning. Is that my Harry?
That's your Harry.
What?
Yes, I know. Nice seeing you, Everett.
What? Oh, good morning to everybody, though.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So if there is a realm that's incomprehensible, we can comprehend it by simply conceding it is as it is, regardless of what I think, and start to take the thinking off of it so that I can begin to concede it and experience it as a present state rather than be preoccupied with the effects I create, thinking constantly I need to act better, do better, have more to get there. That obsessive nature gives me an impression there's nothing else going on because I become consumed with effects. And while my thinking doesn't create reality, it certainly creates effects that can be consuming, and I can be intoxicated with those effects just like I was with drugs and alcohol. And they diminish my capacity because my preoccupation is focused on seeing things that aren't happening as happening. So what is happening, I'm not seeing at all. And you can't be very functional when you're pretending that things that aren't happening is all that's happening. Because what's actually happening, I have no seeming relationship with. And if I did, I would interact with it in a way that would be just the chance of the one thing being right that I did would be against all other wrong things I could potentially do in terms of odds. Very slim chance I'm going to get it right in that way. But intuition as inspiration and wisdom becomes the natural state of my knowing, to your question and point, Les, becomes the natural state of my knowing because it's the natural state of our knowing, because it isn't divisible, it isn't separate, it isn't apart, it isn't somewhere else, it's just an absolute essence that's always here. And if it's an essence, it's essential. It isn't an option and it isn't a negotiation. It's not something I can it's not something that comes or goes. It's not something I can take or leave, but I'm certainly free to think that I can and suffer the consequences as a result of that thinking. I'm not condemned by that source. I'm condemned by the source of the thinking I'm doing. So it puts thinking at the center of the potential problem, not because thinking's the problem, but my misuse of it is a problem. And I would suggest that may be so for all of us. ultimate freedom allows us to be so free as to think things that are wrong are right and live that way, continue to exist that way, continue to base those fixed beliefs, to continue to base my actions on those fixed beliefs and wonder why I feel conflicted and wonder why the outcomes are often substantially less than I might have imagined or wished for or hoped for.
I think this discussion is helpful and probably universal when we talk about the absolute nature of reality as compared to getting into things like, and talking about knowing, as compared to things like understanding, and anyone's definition of either spirituality or their higher power or anything like that. And one of the things that the program, one of the things that finally coming forward really helped me with was the more I was caught in my own thoughts, the more I felt I became the center or the black hole, depending on my feelings of anything. And once I accepted the reality that I'm one amongst many, and the best way to get along is not to understand, but to accept that things are the way things are. And the only thing I can or should be trying to do is how to be part of as compared to apart from. And that whenever we talk about things in the program, like, go with the flow, get in the middle of the pack. And I just think that that's every time I use the word think or feeling, I feel like I've walked into my own trap, by the way, Jeff, which you said, but that's okay. That's where the comfort lies. This quest for understanding, this quest for knowing is fine as far as feeding, our ability to think. But the obsessive nature that led to my alcoholism often leads my thinking to the obsessive nature of then missing what's right in front of me, which is the absolute nature of reality. And when I relax, and that's why meditation is helpful, because I'm no longer trying to be the source. I'm trying to be comfortable and accept the source.
So when you're thinking you're not the source, or when you're thinking you are the source, or when you're thinking you can be a part, or when you're thinking you are a part of, would that natural absolute state change?
Never.
Yes. Okay. So in thinking about trying to become a part and be in the center, that suggests to me that you're still thinking you're not a part, you are a part and not in the center. And
well, that's correct. But
ultimately, this concession is starting to see that if the center is a place that has us in it, then that would be the place we're all in constantly, like now. It's all the same place. It's not even a place. It's just a present state of being, a present state of knowing.
To me, this is just the next level of the depth of the word acceptance, particularly as it's used in the big book and otherwise. So not only in the acceptance of my inability to handle whatever it is, or the unmanageability of my life, but often the stray or errant or the feeling, which is good because there's nothing truth about that, of disconnectedness or apartness. And that's why I bring myself back to the center. Same thing with meditation, there's the calm, that the thoughts will happen, but they're not reality. And that's okay, because we do have a brain, we do have thoughts, and there are a myriad of them, and they're not necessarily true, they're not necessarily reality, they're just thoughts. But it's okay. It's when I give power to that which is not reality that's where I generally run into issues. And so I need this reminder that my thoughts are not the basis of reality.
Yeah.
And
Well-
if that's the case, then I can't be uncomfortable because I have to recognize that my thoughts are not an anchor. They're actually just a drift. And that if one's going to be comfortable, if one's going to be stable, if one's going to be okay, it's nice to have an anchor or a baseline or a given. And that's what I think you try to help us understand, the absolute nature of reality, and that once one can get by the limitations or the need to understand or whatever and have that acceptance, everything can fall into place. Everything can have a different value or effect. And that's wonderful. But
So-
it's often constant because until we try to this journey, we have been living a life where our thoughts and our understanding and our rationality is the basis of how we not only thrive and get along and survive, but also how we accomplish and become, whatever, wonderful, powerful, happy, and the like.
Thank you
So
very
the
much.
question
That was great. Thank you.
Question we started with today is either we're doing it or it's been done for us. And if it's done for us, it's nothing we can get, it's nothing we can lose, it's nothing we can have more or less of. If it's done by us, then the governance of that is going to be the rational ideas we have about it, which once we start thinking it is rational, we're now thinking irrational terms about it because it isn't rational, because it would defy all rationale to have no limits, because rationale is based in an analytical process of limits and change. So you're still with us, Les?
I like the way you can only see his silhouette too. That was powerful for the people listening.
Les? Yeah, there he is. Okay, he's back. So I want to make a point to you. If the absolute nature is absolute, it's always absolute for each of us and every one of us and everything, every molecule, everything below the molecular structure. It's all the same. It's always constant. The only thing we're ever struggling with is thoughts that are in conflict with reality. So when you feel alone, you're feeling a thought that has no basis. When you're feeling apart from, you're feeling a thought that has no place. The reason it has no place is because it has no substance. And think of understanding and substance, something beneath our feet, kind of the way we're held to the earth by gravity that we don't think much about, but we count on it constantly. It's just like localized evidence of things that are happening that we don't think much about and yet rely on completely with very little doubt. So if I have to accept something, that means I'm in charge of it. And if I have to believe in something, that means I'm in charge of it. My belief requires it. And if I have to have faith in it, that means I am in charge of it. And it's my faith and my belief and my hope and my ideas that govern it. When in fact, all those things do is govern the thinking I do about it. And to any degree I think of it as something subject to my control, including acceptance, I am once again beginning to do the dance of self-centeredness in a new way, thinking I've burst through it, but I've just expanded the self-centered concept to include a little more of it, but not quite surrendered to the concession that it's absolutely never changed, no matter what I've ever done. And it's never changed when I accepted it or didn't accept it. All that changes is my human experience.
I'm not sure that we're disagreeing, and I'm not sure. Well, my thoughts, my description does not affect the absolute nature of reality.
Yes.
My thoughts, my feelings, even though they're part of them, do not necessarily affect or change the absolute nature of reality. absolutely affect the nature of my feelings and my thinking and my living. And
Yes.
therefore, my
Yes.
descriptions and my conversation with you has nothing to do with us trying to redefine, re-expand, understand, or in any way affect the absolute nature of reality. What it has to do with, as we go through this human experience with a brain that has thoughts, with a emotions which have feelings that vary minute by minute, second by second, thought by thought, whatever, how we can be okay, or how we can end up continuing to be okay, knowing that these things, which are, quote, part of the molecular reality, doesn't matter when it comes to how do I still get, why do we seek to be aligned with, comfortable with? So I'm not saying any of this to argue or disagree or expand on the absolute nature of reality. I'm talking about it in the sense of how I or we can somehow be okay with whatever is going on, whenever it's going on, however it's going on. And I
So-
recognize that that process is me using my limited desire, understanding, thoughts in order to, quote, I use the word align or the word accept, just to recognize that if I'm not feeling okay or I'm not acting right, that's a reality in the sense that it's happening, but it's not the way that I need to be, act, or feel in that moment.
So dreams feel real too.
Sure. And your point?
And I would say this daydream that we have, that it's still up to us to constantly conquer these things, is interesting, because if we really have conceded to an absolute source, none of those things are actually happening except in the delusional ideas that we're maintaining. And part of the obsession, Les, and I know you've been at this a long time, part of the obsession is maintained, because I'm like on par with you. I hear exactly what you're saying. But beneath the level of what I think I'm doing, I still have ideas that I don't think I'm having. I still have ideas based on in that route that somehow, someday I'm going to fix it. I'm going to do it. I'm the one that's going to end up there. I can say I don't do that because I don't do it the way I used to do it, and I don't do it as much as I used to do it, but I keep finding evidence in the conflicts I discover that clearly indicate I'm still doing it in what we call this subconsciousness, but it isn't subconscious at all because it affects me immediately. The difference between reality is reality, it's just reality. Effects are simply consequences of something I'm thinking. Just like a dream has consequences of the dream. I can think I'm being chased by something down a hallway that keeps growing and growing and growing the faster I run. And I can be horrified by that in the dream with all the narratives that are developed, and still feel that during the day, thinking I'm not feeling it because I feel better than I used to feel, and thinking I'm not doing what I used to do as a result at all. Rather than start to notice that when I'm feeling alone, I'm feeling the thoughts I'm having that have no basis in reality, that I am taking that I'm believing in as truth. Literally doing it in the face of saying I'm not doing it, and actually witnessing the effects. And as a result, if I can feel the effects, just like the symptom of drinking for an alcoholic is the symptom, if I can feel the effects, I am the one causing it. And starting to come to terms with, there are things going on I don't even think I'm doing. And I would suggest that's the greatest aspect of the problem for us as creatures. Because if we do only this level where we think we're thinking it, and now we don't think we're thinking the same way, we think we're no longer doing that thing, and yet we keep witnessing these experiences that can seem demoralizing and depressing and difficult and uncomfortable and destabilized and like a struggle and mental anguish and emotional turmoil and inner conflict. And we get outsized in a rage with other people at times. That energy builds up in us, that discomfort, that dis-ease. And all of a sudden we have an outsized reaction to something, trying to get it out of us, trying to get rid of it, just like I did drinking. So while the absolute nature doesn't change, I would say to any degree, there's a line in the Course in Miracles says that if any one person actually ever forgave, everyone would be forgiven simultaneously, and they would forgive simultaneously too. And it's interesting how we can struggle and act like we're not, because it's not as bad as it used to be, or it seems to have a new face on it, when it's sort of this circular notion that goes on and on and on and on. Suicide's at an all-time high. We do not seem to be talking openly and honestly as a society to deal with the ills that are leading to that conclusion. We don't address it publicly. We don't talk about addiction publicly and openly. It's this thing that's sort of off to the side by a few people who have admitted they're alcoholics, and they seem to be this isolated group, or drug addicts, or sex addicts, or gamblers, or whatever the affliction is, that seems to segregate us from others, when in fact there's no segregation whatsoever. To any degree I entertain a thought as true that isn't true, I create inner conflict in my own thinking. I'm not forced to do it. I'm not, nobody or nothing's demanding it of me. But I feel, like you described, Les, that idea of being in your thoughts. When I think the thoughts are real, I think I'm in my thoughts, and I feel isolated as a result, and I feel separate as a result. And all those feelings, those symptoms, those effects are telling me about the cause I'm creating. I am creating. That's what I am creating in my brain. That's what I'm choosing to do with the body I have and the facility that I have to think and analyze. I am doing that. Not myself. I am doing that. I am choosing that. And to choose that over and over again is insane, because I keep thinking someday it will prove to be true. Someday I will get better. Someday this stuff, I'm going to be on this long journey that we take. Humans are still seeking, and they've been looking the whole time. We clearly have not been looking in the right place. And the place we're in is the place. It's where everything is. Each of us right now shares that, no matter where we are in terms of location. And so too with everyone else that's out there.
It's like putting your own location in the GPS and wondering how to get there, right? If you put where you're at.
Well, thinking you're not there. It's the hardest place to find is the place you're in if you think you're not there.
I've had a experience in sobriety, which I think relates to what you and Lester are discussing, what we're all discussing right now. But what you're focusing on was that I remember and I know you know the shop because you know every nook and cranny in on the West Side, Jack. But there was a shop called Accents on Main Street in Santa Monica, and Britt used to work there, and I was waiting for her. This is while I was active in my addiction, and I was waiting for her. And across the street from Accents is a bar, and I was feeling pretty low. I was coming off a bender, and you know that feeling of self, deprecate. You feel absolutely like you have no self-esteem at all. And I was looking across the street and I saw people at the bar, and they were partying and they were laughing and they looked like they're just having a grand old time. And I felt like, and you hear it in the rooms all the time, like somebody looking into a fishbowl and not feeling a part of, and just feeling isolated and wishing that I was normal and could just be like that. And then I after a lot of work and a lot of time, I got sober, and I felt like I was able to function in society normally. And I then felt a part of. And I thought, and I could walk into a bar like that without, if there was an event, and not want to drink, but be amongst other people and be a part of. And I felt very proud of that. And now in my sobriety, when I look at, and this isn't, I'm hoping this doesn't sound like judgment, but when I'm looking at people festive with lots of alcohol or smoking their, you know, their substances or whatever, I see them almost in a similar way to when I first saw them, like being from the outside looking in, except this time I don't want to be in that fishbowl, and I feel full. I don't have that feeling of lack. I just see that as a universe that I choose not to circulate within, and I feel whole and I feel loved. And if it meant that I would be alone, I wouldn't feel lonely, if that makes sense. And so this desire of being a part of, and this does sound like a judgment, but of a sick society, I prefer not. And I also feel full in terms of circulating in a way that I bump into people, like-minded people that I feel attracted to. I don't know if I've expressed myself the right way, but
what do you think the principle of what you're saying is?
The principle of what I'm saying is that I've lived a life of delusion, of thinking that I wanted to be a part of a society that I really don't necessarily.
So what's the principle?
What's the principle is that I always had what I was searching for.
So right now, you're free to judge whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
And you can see those people as those people doing those things that are separate from you. And you can also see them as those people doing those things that are very much a part of you.
Very much a part of me. How so?
They're in the world. They exist. You observe them. You've come to conclusions about them.
Okay.
And seem somewhat reluctant to have the judgments you have. There's nothing wrong with judge. Brains are designed to judge. That's primarily what they're designed to do. If we didn't judge, we'd never be able to take a step. We'd never get up from a chair. We'd never be able to do anything. But we've been so caught in this narrative of trying to avoid doing the things that are natural while doing the things that are unnatural as though they're the only things we can do, and miss the fact that those people doing those things are still absolutely in the same world and sphere that we're in. We can't isolate ourselves from them. We can think we do, and we can surround ourselves with people that don't do those things. But just beyond that surrounding of people that don't do those things are those other people surrounding them. So it diminishes our ability to even to think of anyone as segregated is to think of everyone as somewhat unaffected and disconnected. It's exactly the role that I play in my own thinking when I think that thinking that has no basis is in fact true. I feel I'm disconnected because I'm feeling thoughts that have no connection to reality. Why? They're useless. They're functionless. I have no ability to apply them in any meaningful way. And every time I apply them, I hurt someone somewhere, which means I hurt everyone everywhere. Because I funnel into that system of energy that we all share, this corrosive, reactive, fear-based concept. And I don't talk about this because I don't do it. I talk about this because I want to get better at admitting what I do and noticing that I do a lot of wrong every day, a lot of wrong. I have a lot of petty thoughts about people and how they behave and what they do. And it tells me how pitiful my own ideas are in relation to my own sense of my seeming self. And my experience is that the self I think I am is pitiful. It has no basis. The whole thing is based on fear and loathing and hatred and anger and hostility. And I'm trying to manage that. I'm trying to get that thing better. That's its basis. It's not going to get better. I'm only going to get better at making believe that it being worse is somehow survivable, and that I'm better off by developing numbing effects and thinking I have nothing to do with it, and thinking if I don't feel it, it's not happening, and coming up with new ways to be intoxicated with new ways, rather than realize the absolute nature of my existence is not struggling at all, nor is anyone's. But my thinking about it is definitely struggling when I have any inclination toward making believe my thoughts are real and true. And any division I see in my thinking, any conclusions I have that give me a feeling of being better off because I'm not them, is kind of a sick way of thinking, to think that people have to be worse off for me to be better. It's very divisive. It's not quite what I believe the freedom that the big book talks about was referring to.
I don't know if it's that. What is that feel? It's not like I don't. When I have a hard time. I have a hard time. I'm not talking about like being a jerk to people, but I have a hard time talking to people who are under the influence. And I don't care. And I don't mean someone who's slurring their words, or I just mean if I sense that someone's under the influence, I feel as if the conversation that I'm having isn't authentic. I feel as if that it's that I can't, that I quite frankly, okay, it's a judgment, I guess, I don't know. I feel like it's a waste of time. Like I could be speaking to somebody and having a real conversation. And it's not that I have ill will for the person. It's just that's what they want to do. And it's just, and I prefer that. I mean, time on this planet as a human, I believe, is finite. And that time that I could be spending with the person who's trying to get me to drink a Pacifico, I could be speaking with you.
Yeah. Well, listen, so those are judgments. And they're either going to be good judgments or bad judgments. And judgment isn't the issue. Brains are designed, we're designed to make choices in our favor based on an instinctual drive to survive and thrive. That's how we're designed.
Yeah, I got it.
So if I'm thinking I shouldn't even be judging things, I'm thinking I shouldn't be thinking at all. That's a major conflict.
Mm-hmm.
What happens, though, in judgment, my experience, pretty well documented, is that when I think my judgment is real, I now have contempt for other people. It's a very different thing than having a judgment.
Okay.
I now think the thinking is real, the judgment is real, and now I hold those people in contempt. I don't just see them as people I don't want to talk to. I see them as a whole group of humanity that I want nothing to do with whatsoever. And if within the context of thinking, I can actually embrace them and say, look, I am with you, Everett, in the sense that I'm not interested in wasting time talking to somebody who's not listening. It does not do them any good to give them the impression that what they have to say has any value. And I don't like engaging in that kind of reactiveness. And I know within the context of this conversation, it's very easy to engage in that. And I've been very good at doing that, but I'm not sure it's been good doing it.
And
My
when
experience
when you look up the definition of engaged, you see that it means to start fighting. You engage.
I don't know about
not
that.
necessarily.
No.
It's an embrace. People get engaged before they get married. That certainly isn't a fight. It certainly often ends up that
I think
way,
that proves my point more.
yes, could be. But if the absolute nature, if we've been doing this so long and historically have not talked about it, the chances are we're not quite talking about it accurately enough to make the point and to have the point made clear. That we're doing a lot of the thing we don't think we're doing, while we're saying because we're not doing what we used to do, we're no longer doing it.
Okay.
That's a pretty broad concession that we have nothing to do with it now because I don't drink anymore. That's the end of it. I don't do any of it. I have known dozens of people to kill themselves in sobriety.
Can you define it?
Where was I referring to it? What were you?
You just said because I'm not doing it.
Whatever I think I'm not doing.
like with them, like you said, that if I have contempt for them, they're there, in my opinion, kind of wasting their time. And 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 if I have contempt for them because of their behavior, then
I'm reinforcing their behavior by coming at them with an idea that I know better than they do, and they don't know better. And in this conversation, the premise is if this nature exists as nature, it is all of our nature. And everyone would be included in that. And I'm not suggesting I need to go out and engage with the most psychopathic people on the street, hoping they're going to be nice. Because I've learned those people tend not to be nice. And I'm not interested in figuring out how to get stabbed by one of them again.
right, no,
I'm not interested in encouraging them, but I can also be honest with them and simply share that my limited capacity is not interested in engaging in a conversation that is not authentic, that is dishonest in any way. It's not saying that I am being honest in every way. I'm simply saying I don't want to engage at that level. I would rather allow people to fail sufficiently to get to that point that people seem to need to get. And we're getting there, I would say, as a species.
Yeah.
We're like, we talked about this yesterday. We're actually digging a hole to see how far we have to go before we finally admit we're at the bottom.
Yeah.
And the bottom is defined as someone who's interested in no longer digging. Somebody's got to be in that hole to be digging for the hole to be created. And as a species, we're doing it and we're denying it. If we can talk about everyone being included in this, it starts to dispel some of the rumors that it's impossible to have everyone and everything out there aligned. We can talk in terms that might be a little more valuable to that approach, rather than make believe that means I have to go out as a wandering minstrel and become a saint. You know, my sense is the reason they only saint people after they die is because they know that if they don't, they're still living, they're going to disprove the point. Some point people are going to fail. When people die, there's no more failure that they tend to get glowing reviews because all of those idiosyncrasies are over. That's done, that stuff. But we're here, we're using those same idiosyncrasies very often that are idiotic and not healthy. And to think of it as something that I'm not doing because I don't do it the way I used to is a glaring oversight to the potential of actually coming to terms in the most authentic, honest way of what I'm doing right now. And most of it is coming, in my experience, from the things I don't even think I'm doing. But to Les's point, to your point, and I think to all of our experience, the effects are actually they're my GPS. They're telling me what I'm doing that I don't think I'm doing. Just like my eyes can see things, I don't have to see my eyes for them to do what they're capable of doing.
When you say the effects, you mean the behavior of others?
Well, that could be part of it, but largely it's my own discontent, it's my own irritability, it's my own restlessness, impulsiveness, hyper-reactivity, defensiveness, defiance, denial. All those things are going into it. Those are all evidence of, okay, I'm doing these things. I'm still doing these things. Conceding that is an honest, when wrong is seen as wrong, it's right. My relationship to it is right now. I have a chance to actually grow in relationship to it rather than tamp down the idea that I'm going to turn wrong into right by making believe it's not happening and wonder why I live with these haunting sensations.
That's what society's doing right now. You would say.
Well, I would say that's what I do whenever I maintain ideas that give me an impression that I'm alone, separate, depressed, anxious, stressful, all that kind of stuff. Natural stress is not a problem. This induced stress, the induced insanity is all coming out of these ideas we have that simply are not true. And it's very simple to admit that I may be doing things I don't think I'm doing.
Yeah.
And start to live with that. And all of a sudden I start laughing at the things I used to defend and realize that my defense of them was actually evidence I was doing them while I was fighting the claim I wasn't. I didn't do that. You did that. You said that. I didn't do that sort of thing. Now I realize, no, if anybody else says it, I'm involved in it. If I'm reacting to it and reacting to them, The primary impact is in my own reaction. It's not what they're doing. They're giving me a chance to notice the weaknesses, the vulnerabilities, the shortcomings, the failures, the defects. I can say thank you then rather than fuck you. And the relationship, talking about an embrace and engagement, one is sort of thinking I need to disconnect. And I hear this a lot from people. I can't hang out with toxic people. I said, well, you're hanging out with one for sure. To think that means you're highly sensitive to that. You can't be sensitive to toxicity in others if you aren't toxic, any more than we can see red if it didn't exist in our eyes capacity. There are sounds that dogs hear we don't hear. We don't hear those. If I'm craning to hear those things all day long, I'm living an impossible life. I'm claiming that the symptoms I'm creating have nothing to do with me. I'm claiming that they're not quite as bad as they used to, so I'm not doing the thing anymore. It's a lie. It is not true. Won't be true. Coming to terms with it is really what this conversation is about. Public concessions. Hang on, I got to turn off my dog alarm.
Dog alarm?
There's a motion detector that it has a bunch of different choices as to how it sounds, and one of them is barking dogs.
Oh, okay.
So to talk about this publicly actually allows, in my experience, I did it with individuals for a long time, and they would kind of get it, but they would never. My experience is the more people I'm in the face of, the more pressure I feel to get it right, which tells me that there's a lot of wrong I'm still struggling with.
You mean they're barking up the wrong tree?
I mean that if I'm in front of more and more people, I tend to have a greater sensitivity to the weaknesses and vulnerabilities of my experience. When I'm isolating with one who I think I'm a friend with, I've often very much bought them off in certain ways where we kind of don't contest each other in certain areas.
Signing off on each other's bullshit.
Well, I wouldn't say each other's, but mine. I wouldn't notice theirs if I didn't have it, if I wasn't capable. It wouldn't bother me. There's no greater impact than what's happening in our own experience.
Well, there's a certain, and here's, you're going to check me on this for sure, but there's certain rules of engagement. There's certain rules of engagement in society that you can't exactly say what's on your mind about what the person is saying because of.
But those are rules of disengagement, actually, because they're backward.
Yeah.
We think that we need to maintain those things because we're afraid of people contesting what we're thinking that's wrong.
It's kind of like likes on Instagram. This stupid freaking, I gotta like this post because I want them to like my post type of thing. I know you're not on that type of, neither am I, but it was. And it was just like this artificial, weird.
It's dopamine. When you get a like, when you text somebody and they text back, it's a dopamine.
So it's kind of like you.
But think of the chemical. We're intoxicated with our own capacity to develop chemicals in our body that give us the same kind of feel-good stuff that the outside chemicals used to give us. The Coke, the Valium,
isn't it true, Jack, that that pity releases when someone's like, "Oh, Jack, you've been, the world's been really hard on you," that we get there's a physical reaction when you receive pity that it actually, I think our bodies like release dopamine or something.
There's the fact is that if we can induce our body to deal with issues that are nothing more than fantasy, we're actually subjecting it to a nightmarish experience and depleting chemicals that are actually designed for our well-being that are now being misused and overused to the point that we don't feel well. And we literally are sick. It diseases our capacity. It literally diseases, that lack of ease impacts our body and creates disease because our body's systems are not able to function under the stress and pressure because they're dealing with insanity rather than reality. This whole thing is an induced state of insanity, making believe it's reality. To think of my thoughts as reality when they're not, to think of them as a product of reality and a possibility of reality and something I'm considering and imagining, it's very different than thinking of them as reality. It's irresponsible to make believe something that's not true is true. There's always going to be a negative outcome, just like in mathematics, two positives are equal a positive, right? Two negatives equal a negative. So what's that mean? Right as right is right. Wrong as wrong is right. Look at the outcome. The outcome is right. But when it's wrong is right, it's wrong. And right is wrong is wrong. It's a negative, meaning it's negating reality. It's trying to take reality away. It's trying to take it for who I am, what I think, rather than as it is. And what's service about? Giving. It's not about taking. And what's interesting is when I think that way, I have misgivings immediately. So if I'm looking at my experience honestly, I can start to see that the road has been littered with signposts and alarms telling me what I'm doing in my thinking. And I've been thinking of it as God blaming me, faulting me, shaming me, contemptful. God isn't answering my prayers. God is not doing for me what I should be doing. I'm thinking of God as a human because that ego becomes my God. I've created this ego, this self, this thing I could think about and wonder why I struggle with God. That has become my God. And I am still nursing it to the degree that I think I need to do things to feel better rather than recognize that feeling worse is feeling better when what I'm feeling is worse. Starting to really come to terms with living with how things are rather than I think they should be or hope they would be or wish they were, and all that kind of stuff that we get into that meandering. It undermines our body's ability to function. And the dysfunctional capacity is evident today in all of the new disorders. Think of the disorder of making believe thinking is reality, and reality is no longer reality. That's a disorder that's out of order. Thinking's out of order. What do? We act out of order.
So when my friend kept asking, you know what the truth is? This is the truth. What you're saying is the truth. I could have repeated this, and that's the truth, right?
Well, it isn't what I say. It is truth is just true. It doesn't serve itself because it's not a thinking process. It's just a knowing state. And that knowing state is absolutely present now. And if it wasn't, it would not be knowing and it would not be absolute. If we could void it in any way, if we could negotiate our way in and out of it, it would not be absolute. It would not be ever present. It would not be omniscient. It would not be omnipresent. It would not be any of the things that have been referred to throughout history.
So you're saying the truth is there no matter what. We have no effect on the truth. What we think or what we do the truth is the truth, and it's there.
True. Yes. And it isn't there, it's here.
Is
We
it
think
here
of it as
and
there.
there? Can it be there and here, or is it only here?
There is no there and then within an absolute state of being, because if it's there, it means it's not here. And yet, Anthony, think of it, it's there where everybody seems to be automatically.
But if we're even having to discuss it, isn't it possible that it's not true? What you're saying?
If you're looking for that, yes. If you're thinking in absolute terms, you'll start seeing that it's absolute. There and then are not functions in an absolute state. They're not, they're relative terms based in a relative experience, based in a relative seeming world, based in a world that's in a process, not one that's absolute and doesn't change. Once you're beyond time and space, there is no then or there. And it isn't actually being beyond it because, Anthony, to your point, it is actually within it also. It is within what it seems to be without. It's not just beyond the bounds of the relative.
Way too far, Jack.
Well, consider that we think of this thing as just like people who thought the horizon meant the end of the world and felt doomed. We think of God and this infinite sources in the heavens, out there somewhere to get to. And yet it's always here, it's always present, it's always now. It's always here, it's always now.
Yeah, I love when he told you asked my dad, is it possible that it doesn't require you to believe if it's there, is it possible it doesn't require you to believe in it? And he kind of never had heard that before. He's like, I guess you're right.
So to the degree that you're talking about then and there, Anthony, then and there is now wherever then and there is.
That's great. Then and there is now, wherever
regardless
that is.
of where it is. Yeah. So to your point that it's part of it, it's always present. It's kind of like we look back in telescopes to what we say is the past, the history. We look into the void of this past, right? But we're always looking scientifically and through those telescopes in the present.
Can it be
We're
present
never-
and not present at the same time, or does it have to be one? Oh no, I'm everything, but I can only be either present or not present.
Well,
can it be both?
Jack, I hear, like, I think that we're spirits having a human experience, right? And so then as a human experience, we live on linear finite terms here on this rock that's flying through the universe at 1,000 miles an hour. But as spirits, we're infinite souls.
Little faster than that.
So
to think of them as separate, though, is to think that the supremacy is in the relative and it's capable of denying the other. We can deny it in thinking. We can think it isn't there, but it would always be present regardless of what we think. And so the question is, Everett, which would be primary and what would be secondary?
Yeah.
Did we create reality? Was there no universe before humans started? The first caveman started thinking, and all of a sudden, where was he to be if all of a sudden his thinking created the universe? We've been around a very short period of time compared to the length of seeming time the universe has been around.
Define we.
Everyone.
No, man, I'm talking about we as physical beings, or
yes,
as consciousness.
We in any way that you could. Well, it wouldn't be we as a collective, because that would be the spiritual basis isn't in divisive. You can't apply mathematics to it. Even mathematics starts to fall apart when you reach the infinite realm.
That's pi.
Pi is just you're talking about an irrational number that goes on forever. Isn't it interesting that we'd call numbers that go on forever irrational?
Or pi. I like pi.
But pi is a number that goes on forever because it's defining a circle. The variations in a circle are infinite. The variations of degrees in a circle are infinite. As a matter of, so too are they within a line. When you start dealing with infinitesimal points, you're dealing with an infinite number of points. So technically in mathematics, a point is a concept. It's not reality.
As spiritual beings, are we one, or are we? It seems like when like right up until now today, I've said to myself, like, as a spiritual being, it's like I'm my own spirit, you're your own spirit, all of us on our call are also. But now I'm starting to think that as a spiritual being, we must just be one.
Probably not one, and probably not zero. Probably an essence that's so incalculable that it's hard to consume and to comprehend within the analytical process. But it's not hard to concede that if it is, it is. And if it is as it is.
Can it be is and isn't at the same time, or it has to be is? It's always is or isn't. Can it be both?
In a relative system, yes. But in an absolute system, it doesn't. Again, Anthony, it's not a spatial bound thing. It's a dimension that's incapable of being discussed from rational terms, but it's absolutely capable of being conceded as existing in whatever the form it is. And I would say it's not even a form. Because
and how
again,
about present and not present? Can it be present and not present, or it has to be one of the two? It's either present. It's like Schrodinger's cat. You don't know what it is until you open the box.
Well, I think we've created all sorts of things to justify an absolute present state. Think about something absolute, look up the word, get back to us next week on what you think. Because absolute doesn't mean there's exceptions. Absolute does not mean exceptions. It doesn't mean options. It doesn't mean negotiable. It means absolute. Infinite does not mean sometimes, maybe not all times. You're starting to deal in a realm. To concede this doesn't mean having to understand it, but to understand that it's inconceivable is the beginning of actually understanding. You know, when the Bible says that the knowing of God is the fear, that's curious. that we would begin to know God based on the fear of God, when in fact the God, my suspicion is we've been talking about, is the fear built into the ego self that we think is in fact God, that we've been worshiping, we've been praying to, we've been begging and pleading and wishing and hoping and had faith in, and constantly feel depleted as a result of our inexhaustible attempts to turn it into reality. Well, reality has never been anything what it is.
This is the This is the Hindu meaning of absolute. It says the word absolute has multiple meanings, including very great or to the largest degree possible, used when expressing a strong opinion, to give a strong reaction, and to be an idiot. I don't know why it says that. I think the university has an absolute right to decide who it admits, who it expels, and who it remits.
Yes, but it's discussing it in relative terms.
Uh-huh.
But if you think of absolute as absolute, whether the Hindus find it or not, it says in my dictionary, free or relatively free from mixture, pure.
Relatively free. So wait a second, we got a problem.
I understand, but Anthony, words do not define essence.
Well,
words
wait a second. Why is it saying that though? That's kind of interesting.
Here's another one. Being governed by or characteristic of a ruler or authority completely free from constitutional or other restraint. Absolute power. Having no restriction, exception, or qualification. Unquestionable. Now, can we question it? Yes. But our question becomes unquestionable. We begin to ask questions that are questionable, rather than concede it and try it on. This isn't an argument in favor of thinking that if we understand it, we'll start relying on it, because if we think we understand it, we are only going to be relying on our understanding.
And I love the kicker, the spoiler alert, which is whatever you're thinking, whatever this, it's not even the right, you're not even thinking it to yourself. You're thinking to, it's the whole thing at the very end falls apart, so to speak.
Trying this on is beginning to concede that if it is, it is, whatever it is. And it probably isn't an it at all. It's an is. It's an isness. It's a beingness. It's a nothingness, an emptiness, but it's full of that, whatever that emptiness is. Today, they're starting, Gabe can probably address this better than I, but the physicists are starting to see that there's more matter in space, what we have thought was empty, than there is in all the other matter in the universe. So what they're saying is that nothing matters, literally. We have thought of it as nothing matters, meaning nothing at all matters. This is now saying nothing, in fact, matters. This emptiness, this idea of emptiness that we would think might be a void, may be the essence of an essence that isn't a void at all. And we've been voiding its use by making believe we need to understand it, while thinking nothing is some horrifying, emptiness is some horrifying thing, when emptiness would be full of empty. There would be a fullness to it in some way. But Anthony, the words are never going to hold up. The decisions are never going to be enough. The concessions are never going to be enough. And it's because it's never going to have any impact on something that's absolute. And we've clearly tailored words to create the absolute and the relative, rather than see that the absolute isn't relative, and yet it's within the relative, it's without the relative. It's with or without us.
How about this? This is bizarre here. One of the definitions for absolute, it says not diminished at all, which is what you're saying. But then the second part, it says viewed or existing independently, not in relation to other things.
Yeah.
So as an aspect of other things, not we're an aspect of it. We're not separate from. We're an aspect of, and the essence of what we are is incorruptible innocence.
But he's saying that it's independent of the things, and the question is, when you're in a dream, are you actually affecting reality? Isn't that just an illusion?
Yeah, because it's your brain. Any thought is an illusion.
Yes, exactly. So we imagine things. That's the source of thinking. We imagine and we contemplate. What are we contemplating? What we're thinking. We're looking for in it what's functional here, what's useful. What's going to be productive?
What's going to
And
make
rather
me
than-
happy?
Well, that's one of the things of productivity is typically happiness, satisfaction, fulfillment of productivity. But if the productivity is failure, we can be really good at that and not have the happiness. Or we can be really sick and think that's our lot in life, that's all that we are. I think karma has been created to help justify that we don't need to be concerned about other people.
Can you summarize what Les was saying a little bit? He was right. I love the way he was silhouetted, and he was saying something that I related to. Oh, that he has to center himself. Once he starts thinking, he has to stop thinking. Maybe. What?
Stephen Hawking said that if there's any infinite realm, we're all at the center. Everything would be at the center. And I'm going to let Les speak to what Les spoke to. But the point is, if we're always there and we're looking for it, we clearly aren't thinking we're there. Starting to notice this is starting to notice the impact of the thinking we're doing that we don't even think we're thinking. To be feeling we need to center ourselves, to be feeling we need to get somewhere, to feeling we need to have something. It isn't to say we can't have those things and feel better having those things. But when they become the only thing we have to have, think about
Well, and also we're not even thinking to the right person. That's the kicker. Like whatever you're thinking to the person that's really not even you, right? Is that what you're saying?
It isn't even a person.
Yeah, that's
it's just a thought. It's a thought to be our reality, and it becomes who we think we are. But here's the difference. And you hear people talk about this. They feel stuck in their thoughts, stuck in their head. It's because they think their thoughts are reality. They feel stuck in them because now you're in the bubble, and everywhere you look in a bubble reflects where you are. Everywhere you look, all you see is you. Interestingly, bubbles basically are like a mylar film. And on the interior, it's convex. Everywhere you would look back into your own witness. That's a very horrifying place to be when you're trying to avoid looking at what you're doing and trying to avoid actually noticing the impact you're creating. That self that has been difficult to face through history, Never Ending Story, that movie was a great description of the last test of the universe being saved was these armored men having to face themselves. And next to this arch they went through was a pile of saddles and armor and swords and all of the weaponry they thought made them strong, all wasted because they disintegrated in the face of looking at their actual experience. This has historically been mythology, superstition, fairy tales, all of the old moral stories of the Knights of the Round Table. All that kind of stuff has developed over this not facing self, not honoring the honor in our own experience. But when you face it, you see it isn't there. And now the actual essence becomes more obvious because the preoccupation of trying to maintain it is no longer so intoxicating, nor is it engaging, because you realize it's insane to make believe that an image we're creating and thinking is reality. While they're illusions, they're just images, thoughts. And our usefulness and creativity and innovative nature is squandered in this battle that isn't even happening except to the degree we maintain the ideas that we have about the self we think we are. To any disturbance I experience, if I can feel the effect, I know that it's my thinking that is the cause. I am choosing it freely. Why would I choose something freely that's so sick if I weren't sick in the thinking I was doing? I wouldn't. I would be choosing productively, gainfully, helpfully, nobly, by admitting everyone else
what's
already
interesting,
knows.
though, squander says to allow an opportunity to pass or be lost. So that's kind of good when you squander. You just let it pass. You're not holding on to an idea. You squander. Squander could be good, right?
But again, to think you're holding on to it is a delusion. The book says we let go of old ideas. Absolutely. Why? Old ideas don't exist.
So you can't hold on to something and let it go at the same time. It's either you're holding it or letting it go, right? Is that what you're saying? You can't do both.
If you don't have it, you have nothing to let go of.
What if you
don't
could do
think
both?
you have
What if
it,
you could hold it and let it go? Isn't that great?
That's the illusion
Ooh, nice.
of thought.
but you can think you're holding it, Anthony, and this is the point. Thinking you're holding on to something doesn't mean you're holding on to anything but the thought thinking you're holding on to something. You're capable of doing that. It doesn't create reality.
And it's not even you. That's the part that always gets me. Just when I think I figured it out, you always say, but that's not even you that's thinking about it. It's terrible.
Les, why don't you go ahead and explain to Anthony what you were saying?
Yeah, I really liked it. And I think Jack did too. Everybody, they were like, I like Les.
I thought I was in mental obsession witness protection with my background like this, but I guess not.
It's so good, man. I'm telling you.
I just need to move my chair out into the sun, but that
was really good, Les.
You just got kicked out of the program, Les.
So yeah. I think I know what to say, but every time I try to start in this discussion, I recognize the limitation of both of those. So
beautiful.
That was great.
What I am trying to articulate is that in listening to the way you present everything, Jack, and if what you're saying is the reality and the truth, all of the descriptions and definitions and things that either I'm saying or Anthony or even Everett bring up, what we're doing is just that conversation that way makes us separate, apart from, say we are, to be connected, to be centered, whatever. And of course, that's the way most of us, all but you, naturally think, try to understand, connect, and become part of. The beautiful thing about the way you articulate things, or the understanding or the words you use to try to express, is that if we go to that place and flip everything on its head, that reality is reality, we're all connected, we're all in the center, we're all that. Anytime I make any conversation or make any effort to think or try to be aligned, part of, or whatever, I'm deluding myself as if I'm not part of. But that's the lack of truth or reality, illusion or delusion that thoughts have. I have 20,000 thoughts a day, and probably less than 100 are true or have reality. And as a result of those thoughts, I often have feelings that may not be based in reality. That's okay, but not whether or not I accept what you're saying or not, whether or not what you're saying is true or not, all I can do as in this human body, with this human mind and this human condition, is try and hope to find a way to live moment by moment as best I can, as happy as I can. And if I have some kind of ethical, moral, or even egotistical compass, hopefully I'm not trying to spat on shit or hurt others in the process.
Well, I guarantee you, to the degree that that moral compass is immoral, you are hurting people and you are shitting on people and you are having that impact. And so am I, and so are all of us. And the idea that we're not, the idea that we're not.
Shitty. I use one swear word and we have to repeat it. I tell you, I was doing so well with all that.
I'm going to feed you a couple of thoughts.
You got to wait a minute, because we can't talk about shit and feeding in the same next breath. So just move on to something.
Well, it's no coincidence we use the word shit for waste products. So when you talk about, Les, being alone, being apart and all that, you're really thinking you're alone and you're thinking you're apart. You're not apart, you're not alone. And beginning to distinguish that slight variation. When you listen to your language, and we years back, that suggestion to watch your words is a suggestion not to censor what you're thinking, but to listen to the words and notice what you're saying, like write them down. And when you say, I am alone, you really believe that thought is true. To feel that you are alone, rather than I think I'm alone when I'm thinking thoughts that are lonely. When I'm thinking thoughts that have no basis, thoughtless thoughts, for instance, they have no basis, no substance other than thought. It's thought thinking of thought, right? The source of thought then becomes thought. That isn't reality being expressed. That isn't intuition being expressed. It's just an experience of my thinking about my thinking. if I think I'm disconnected because of that, I think the infinite is actually affected by it, rather than see all that's affected is what I'm thinking, that I'm alone. I'm actually accurately, to your point about feelings not being reality, my feelings are actually accurately telling me that the loneliness is the basis of the thought that has no basis. This is a thought with no denominator, no substance, no potential for usefulness at all. I can apply it a million times, and I'm always going to meet resistance, and I'm always going to contaminate the environment I'm involved in. Always. Because it's not going to be.
I can see how that applies to connectedness, loneliness, uniqueness, individualness.
That's a start.
I'd like you to explain it. Well, no, but that has to do with connectivity. But oftentimes I have emotions or feelings, not so much of separateness, but of happiness, unhappiness, dismay, whatever. And I'm trying to help me to understand how that is not necessarily reality. I don't see that there's anything wrong in the universe or not, if a person is either unhappy or giddy or whatever. That's just a natural fluctuation of emotions that a thinking being can have.
Yes. So to think of feelings as reality is to think of the thoughts that promote the feelings as reality. To even imagine that. What's interesting is feelings are coming from a body, right? They're actually our body language. The feelings are actually they're like the dashboard on the car. They're not the car, but they're the dashboard giving us all the indications we need of how well the car is running, how fast it's running, how much gas we have, the temperature, the battery, all that kind of stuff, right? So the feelings are giving us their effects of the cause of thinking. So my experience has been that I used to dismiss the feelings while I was maintaining the thought, thinking the thought was right, but the feeling was wrong. And I began to see that if I actually listen to the feelings, I'm actually defining the thought. The feelings are defining the thought I'm having. So when I feel alone, the feeling is it's giving me perspective to say, my thought has no basis. I'm thinking about something based only on what I think. It has no basis in reality other than my make-believe context.
And you're not even thinking it to the right person that's you.
At this point, Anthony, I'm thinking about thinking. And if I'm feeling lonely, I am feeling the absolute non-existent nature of a thought I believe should be reality. I'm still thinking of it as being reality, which is why I feel it's lonely.
And I
don't know that we want to be in. I don't know that. Okay, so I personally, as much as I want to understand, accept what you're saying, I believe that the concept of being happy, joyous, and free, for me, being a selfish, self-centered, pleasure-seeking individual, I want to discard anything that has to do with depression, disconnection, whatever, because those aren't reality.
Exactly.
I don't want to accept the supposition and preposition that if I'm happy, joyous, and free and fun, that's not reality either. Because that's where I want to be, is happy, joyous, and free. And I don't care that it's a delusion, because I feel good while I'm happy, joyous, and free. And even if that means you think I'm being judgmental about myself or the others, I just think that I shouldn't say that. My experience has been, as much as I intellectually want to understand, accept, and agree with what you're saying, there's still the pleasure-seeking part of myself that wants to feel good, that wants to feel valuable, that wants to be of service, that even though I've got to be careful that it's ego, they're happy to hear when someone says, thank you for what you've done or otherwise.
You don't need to be careful. The whole premise of this conversation is not to put you on high alert to avoid doing what you're doing while you're doing what you're doing, but start to notice that we're doing what we're doing. Despite what we're thinking about it, there's a lot more going on in our process than we're admitting.
Yeah.
And what I have learned in emotional sobriety is that if I'm constantly trying to feel better, I am reinforcing the wrong I'm doing by thinking it shouldn't be happening while I'm doing it. I'm ignoring this aspect of my own ability to think, to imagine, to rely on belief, to make believe. I'm ignoring it and thinking somehow that ignorance and denial is going to pay off when it never has. And the actual freedom of conceding wrong is wrong is very satisfying, because all of a sudden you have perspective to see, oh, I have no reason to fight this. I don't have to pretend I'm not doing it. Now I have an educated potential to actually address it and correct the wrong immediately, rather than think of it as something I've got to bury and wonder why I feel depressed all the time.
I said that on
Hang
the.
tight,
I
Anthony.
agree with that. I totally understand, accept, and agree with that.
Well, let's say you don't totally yet. Let's say there may be some exploration here between us. Let's just say that, Les. Let's say there may be a little bit of room there beyond the edge of the totality you're thinking.
There's 50% room. I
say that's more than that.
I love that I can give it up instantly when it's something I don't like or doesn't serve me or makes me feel bad. But I don't want to accept that when but I'm not resisting it. I'm letting it go because I want to be happy, joyous, and free, and I want pleasure.
I know, but you're trying to feel better about what you're doing that's wrong, and you're not noticing that the idea you can just simply get rid of it, that somehow or another you miraculously stop creating that, where you've consistently talked about that repetitive nature that seems to feed back in that same way over and over and over again, requiring you to constantly try to get better.
So here's the question.
Yes,
if you can let go of it instantly because it's not real, then that's a great way to let go of anxiety, depression, fear, concern. How am I supposed to have any comfort or feeling if then the thoughts of happy, joyous, serviceful, loving, whatever, I can let go of those just as instantly and say that they're not reality?
Well, they may be more aligned with our purpose and our cooperative, integrated, inclusive nature, rather than a supposed divisiveness that seems to separate and alienate us from others. At the same time, Les, if you're thinking you're holding on to something, you're thinking delusion is real to be held on to, and the ultimate letting go absolutely is seeing that we've never held on to anything delusional at all. There's nothing there to hold on to. The real freedom is coming to terms with this insane context that we've been promoting as thinking a thought that has no basis has a basis for me to let go of, rather than see there's been nothing I've held on to the entire time. I've been holding to beliefs that I keep returning to because I haven't simply acknowledged the depth of that seeming belief that I seem to have buried in my psyche and haven't quite come to terms with yet, and yet continually, day by day by day, run into it and think that learning to numb it and feel that it's not happening is somehow getting me better. What I'm getting better at is denial and delusion and numbness, rather than an awareness of feeling. When I feel wrong is wrong, it doesn't always feel good, but it feels right. There's a rightness to it because it's accurate and it's whole, and it allows the disillusion to begin to occur rather than the repetition of resolution, constantly trying to reapply the same old thinking that I'm imagining someday. It's given me the impression I'm better, while in fact I continually feel that same gnawing thing, especially when circumstances don't go where I think they should.
Well, this to me is like the progression. When we come into the program, we want to abstain from whatever it is, drugs, alcohol, whatever, and the like. And as we move along on our journey of emotional sobriety, we are not saints. We are not perfect. So those things that either used to bring me pleasure or those things that I thought were okay in the past continue to evolve as I go through this journey of emotional sobriety. And so if right now I'm living the delusion that provides me some form of substance and of connectedness and whatever, that as a, quote, people pleaser, that I'm being of service to others, while it may be a delusion, it's a less harmful delusion. And I think, which obviously shows that's not accurate, that it's better than what I was before. And if it's not perfect, at least I'm on the path of progress and not there. So
it's a better
maybe-
delusion.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so let's stop there.
I'm not nearly as uncomfortable with my delusions today as I was when I was drinking.
So let's stop there. If the self that's centered is the one we're told to crush at depth, absolutely abandon, completely, utterly abandon, you think it has any value?
You mean if we don't abandon it, do you think that has value? Is that what you're saying?
Well, let's just say it is a concept, whether we have it or not. Does it have any value?
I'm sorry, are you saying does self-centeredness have a value?
Well, we're asked
asking?
to utterly, completely abandon self. Utterly, completely, absolutely let go of old ideas. Do you think that those things are saying partially let go and hang on to a new concept of delusion and hope one day you'll get better?
No, I think what it says is that we have to let go of old ideas. I don't know if it means we let go of self-centeredness. All self-centeredness to me means is putting myself at the center. It doesn't mean there's no basis or value of self.
You think there's a self to put at the center when it's just a thought. It's just a thought thinking of itself that you're using as an excuse to justify having a self you don't think you can let go of.
Yes, that's what I love, Jack.
So hang with me in this. When you started saying,
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
Did you say hang with me or hang me?
Hang you.
Please,
Everett, re-listen to it. I'd like to stick
He
with
said
the point
what I
here.
always say: the self you think you are isn't who you are. Basically, I love that.
No.
So again, if we're thinking about thinking itself and have determined that that's ourself because now we're the creators of reality, the whole idea that there's a self, why would we be told to completely and utterly abandon this self if there was anything there to hang on to? And again, just like the lie, it isn't being held onto except in a thought that we're holding on to it right now. It's not some historic thing.
I don't disagree with that. The question I would ask then, since I'm a pleasure-seeking entity in this physical body, why is it, where am I going to find any pleasure, relief, happiness if I let go completely of self?
Isn't it interesting, though, Les, that we would rely on delusion as our source of satisfaction and happiness, rather than notice that there is a contentedness and a peacefulness and a stillness and an absolute nature of calm and health, comfort, ease, all of it that's ever presently available. And we have been preoccupied in this attempt to create it for our seeming self and think that those intoxications that you're defining are satisfying enough. They never have been yet.
I love that.
We're still seeking, we're still looking, we're still fighting for it, we're still trying to get. We've had the thing the whole time, we simply haven't been thinking of it accurately. By surrendering absolutely, like the first step, there's no power in the lie I can drink and use, control and enjoy my drinking. Why? There's no power in a lie. There's absolutely no power in delusion. There is no power, there is no satisfaction. Can we imagine there is? Absolutely. We've been doing it through recorded history. I'm going to make one more point, then I'm going to let you continue. When you started, you said we're not perfect, we're not saints. Saints are humans, right? Perfection would be an absolute source. It would be our nature. Our absolute spiritual nature would be our nature. It is perfect because it doesn't change. Do you know where imperfection occurs? Comparing things that are unlike each other to one another.
Imperfection.
That's imperfection, but perfection becomes imperfection.
It comes from imperfection.
When you compare one thing to another, you're always going to find more or less in that other thing. If you compare something to,
I don't think that statement's true. I got to stop you though.
Please let me continue.
But it's not true. I got to stop you. It's not true. You made a statement for our listeners.
If something is compared to itself as it is, a crushed car, it's perfect. If I am comparing my experience right now to my experience right now, rather than what I think it should be, how I think it could have been, what I wished it was, and any of that stuff, If I'm comparing it to something that it isn't, I'm always going to feel imperfect about it. Letting things be as they are, like the Beatles saying, let it be, let it be, let it be, actually allows that perfection to be seen so that the dissolution is immediate. In all of these things we think we're holding on to, we begin to realize I've never held on to anything but the present thought there was something to hold on to. There's nothing there. And in this case, nothing becomes everything because there's room for everything.
I don't think nothing becomes everything. Nothing is everything. It's not it becomes something. It is everything.
In the human process of becoming aware, there is a point at which the awareness becomes aware. We've always had it.
Are you sure about that? You're sure it always becomes, you're saying things that just aren't for sure true. You're so sure in yourself, I have to stop you.
Okay. I have plenty of failings, Anthony. I'm doing my best to put language to a concept that's very hard to define. Can it be argued with? Absolutely. If I've been arguing that truth isn't truth for most of my life, certainly I'm capable of arguing all sorts of other things. So the point of this conversation is to start to look for the connectiveness rather than try to tear down the words and reinterpret them as something else.
No, I think that for me, the point of this conversation is to realize there's no point. It doesn't have to be a point. It's all together.
Then let me mute you. If there's no point, we would have nothing to talk about. In essence,
exactly, and that's what our goal is. You always say when there's nothing to talk about in silence.
It's a present state of being. We are not functioning well on that basis, Anthony. You're right in absolute terms.
There you go. I'll take that.
That's what's ironic. I can't believe that over the course of time, and my coming to this mental discussion obsession on and off for a couple of years, that I actually can see the connection, the full circle of Anthony and Jack.
Well, here's where I wanted to say this.
Anthony, you're saying, but you have said it. My point is, how about this? You've said some things. I've heard what you've said. Initially, I didn't either understand or accept what you said.
And that's my fault.
Now I recognize that what you're saying, coming from the basis of what Jack says is always perfection and reality, that you're spot on.
Right.
And that as soon as you try to talk to Jack or myself about it, all we are doing is expressing the limitation of our words or our methods or our means of coming at what is already
But here's my
absolute.
problem. Listen to my problem. You guys are so deep. This is the greatest discussion I've ever had, but I'm still pissed off at that gardener for missing that big dead branch on that tree
that's
back
the old Anthony. But you're not
hang on.
You do that
Anthony,
because you enjoy
that's
the
mental
fun.
obsession. That branch is driving me nuts. Why can't that guy fix that?
You're both talking about the perfection and the absolute state, and then you're mentioning the human state. We're here in our discussion to discuss how better to express the nature of our nature. And my
when
experience,
it's already there.
I know it is. You're not expressing it very well, though, and neither am I. So the point of this discussion, because it's based on a mental obsession, clearly if there was no mental obsession and nobody was obsessed in their thinking, we would have nothing to talk about. Right. I would say that we're addressing a state of thinking that is conflicted and causing great misery throughout the entire world, and we are part of a species that is absolutely built on the almost identical platform. And if we're dysfunctioning at a level consistently, and you and I can't talk about it productively and gamefully and usefully, then we're really not operating on a level that would be aligned with an absolute source, but more aligned with our thinking about that absolute source. And I would say that's my struggle. That's why I come here. I come here to get better at talking about it, not because I have the answers, because you have the answers and we all have the answers, because there is no question in an unquestionable source. There is no question in an absolute source. And to start to see that starts to help me better assess the dysfunction of my own process. And I'm often reactive because I get stuck to the ideas that I've learned that are the latest, greatest thoughts I've had. And so I feel like I really want to get them out there and I want them to be seen and admired and heard. And that's not always the best potential I have, but it shows the failure of the process in my own doing. For as long as I've done this and as many people as I've worked with, I still come up against those things. I don't think of those things as things I shouldn't be doing. I think of those things as things I am doing. And if I am doing them and think I shouldn't be doing them, I am going to continue doing them thinking I'm not doing them.
You're up to something, Jack.
So Anthony, are you willing to hear? I mean, like I said, I've listened to you and I saw a couple. Are you willing to hear what my imperfect perception of who and how you are and what I've heard from you over the last couple of years and how I believe you are on the path and progress?
If you let me tell you that I love you first.
Oh, okay. I'm still going to say what I feel. Okay.
Thank you.
When you have this wonderful tendency to describe things that you know are not of significant value, whether it's money, cars, no offense, ladies, whatever the emotional fulfillment is that isn't lasting in the past. You didn't seem to describe very much in the past this absolute nature of being and accepting that nothing is everything.
Right.
Now what I perceive is through time and through your progress, through your journey of emotional sobriety, I'm actually evolving my perception of you, or what your understanding is, that I believe you actually have come to accept and believe that. But just like people want to be praised, just like people want to drink, just like people want to have fun, just like whatever, you actually derive some obsessive pleasure of deliberately talking about stuff that you know in 30 seconds any rational person could tell you is nonsense.
Bingo.
Just for the sake of it.
Bingo.
And I'm not going to bite on how bad it was that your branch wasn't trimmed or whatever, and try to, because this conversation has gotten so deep or is so evolving, and with this discussion, that it's no longer like a bunch of people coming to their first meeting and let's tell our little drunkalogue, or let's tell our little, insane value that we put on, the color of our nails or whatever.
Yeah.
Now we're trying to get deeper, and that you've actually gone as deep as it's possibly able to go. I don't find it as funny as I did when I first met you. So keep on with what you're saying.
Thank you.
Keep on with what you feel, but don't play as much, because your I'll call it this, your mental obsession drunkalogue isn't nearly as insightful or enjoyable as your actual articulate thoughts and questions that you pose about either the definition of things and otherwise.
Thank you.
And
that means a lot to me.
I don't know if I consider the source.
in the short time I've known Anthony, I find it's almost like I know when, I always know when, I don't always know, but when Jack is like sharing his pearls of wisdom, and he really, and he really touches a point that is that's a nerve.
Yeah.
A lot of times I find, Anthony, that's when you talk about the branch.
Well,
or
my
the
sense,
or the Ferrari.
Yeah.
To your point, Everett, is we've been trying to be comfortable defending against reality and truth by maintaining this seeming reality and truth of our own. And when the discussion gets close, people tend to react. They tend to get this impulsive. Let me interrupt this. I can't go. I can't. It starts to. It's the pinprick getting close to the balloon. You can't pop a balloon with a bat.
Defense mechanisms go up.
Exactly. So you notice the reactivity.
I'm thinking about a listener. If we weren't recorded, I wouldn't have such a hot spot. But I don't want some guy listening going, I can't listen to anything because he's made a mistake here. So I want to be that voice.
Interesting, Anthony, that you would be so concerned about everyone else while you barely pay attention to what you're doing while you're doing it. And you are like a cannon loaded, just waiting to be heard. You've got an enormous amount of energy. And I share this with you. I am very excitable about this conversation, and I can get very excitable. it has taken me time to learn to diffuse and to start to actually unravel. And I wouldn't say that I'm done with that. I still am not functioning at the greatest capacity a human can function in.
I think
It doesn't.
are. I say not. I'll stop you again, buddy. You are. You're.
Well, people pleasing is one of the forms of addiction that isn't helpful.
The reason I have such a hot spot is because when we first met, you told me about this guy who was having troubles, and you worked with him. And at the very end, you said, "Hey, how you do? What's going on?" And he goes, "Apparently everything." I just love that. Yeah. That's the end. When somebody says, "What's going on?" You go,
but Anthony, it doesn't necessarily mean because of our human experience that we're now going to exhibit that in every way. And because we have this understanding, we've actually unraveled the depth of the things we think we've buried and the secrets we think we keep and all of the dysfunctional natures in our human experience. And that's what we're here to talk about. Beginning to face that doesn't ignore the natural aspect of nature being absolute. It begins to allow the thinking to be seen as the source of the problem. It isn't thinking, it's the dysfunctional thinking.
Well, when I hear you say the point, I guess that's when you say the point, when the guy said apparently everything, he didn't say the point is. Let me tell you the point. He said apparently everything.
But what does that experience at that time in that other place have to do with now?
Because if you're experiencing everything, there's no point. How can you have a point?
Then why come?
That's what I said. Why? That's what you said.
If there's no, ultimately, Anthony, in the infinite realm, there is no point.
There you go, motherfucker. That's it.
I got it. Yeah. But we are having a human experience. People are dying on this planet. You just said what
I wanted to hear.
Anthony, you don't need to hear that to know that.
I know, but that's my problem. I got to hear you say it. I know it.
People are dying on this planet. And I suspect there is a better way we can all function in relation to that and talk about this.
I don't think so. I'm not in that mode. I don't want to. I'm thinking it's now. This is the best. I'm not looking for something better. This is it, Jack. You, me, and everybody.
I'm not looking for something better now either, Anthony.
Yes, you are.
I am looking for an accurate assessment of what's happening now and to begin to admit.
I don't need to look. It's happening. I don't have to look for it. Oh, let me look. It's happening, whether you're looking or not, buddy. I hate to tell you.
Why would you hate to tell me something if it was true?
Because it's rocking your little world.
No, Anthony, I'm talking about human functional capacity, and I would not say we have reached the apex.
You don't have to talk about it. That's the problem. You're talking about it. It's happening. You don't have to talk about it.
But this is a discussion. The point of this time we meet is a discussion. That's the whole point of this. If there's any point,
then don't mute me.
In the absolute nature of nature, there are no points whatsoever. It's an absolute steady. If that has really been conceded by any of us.
That's my point. You're saying the point is, and you just said what I was so
mad
wait a minute.
About. That there is you're saying there's no point. Now you're telling me your point.
Right. Exactly. That's the beauty of this. That's why
Anthony, I was with you for a minute and then I got lost. And are you saying that basically there's no point, period?
Do you believe that?
You're not answering my question.
I'm trying to we're even discussing it, it's a possibility. And not only do I not have a point with other things.
No. I'm just asking you because I need a point of reference to understand you. Because I want to.
You need a point of reference. I love it.
Right. No, but I do need a point. I want to understand.
I'm saying I don't know. That's my strength now. I don't know.
Okay.
For a guy that doesn't know, you sure are adamant.
Yeah, that's the beauty. There's nothing like, yeah.
If you don't know if there's a point. Now, okay, so, and I'll take that. But do you believe that there is human suffering?
Well, that's what Jack started this thing. It doesn't matter what I believe. It is what it is.
No. But I'm just asking.
Anthony, that's just a new form of denial to ignore what's actually happening.
No, because I think that this is a yes or no question. Do you believe there's human suffering?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe that you may have the ability to help quell
I
that
do
suffering.
it. Yes, I do.
Would you not say that that is the point?
Well, that's a double negative. So can you rephrase?
Would you say there's a possibility, at least, that the point of your existence is to help quell human suffering?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the only thing I want to do at this point. That's my number one goal.
So then there's the
Then
point.
why do you tease and argue and do these other things with people that are trying like-minded to be
So
helpful?
you don't look at what's really going on. Have you
Because
ever
he's
seen a
having a
magic show?
human experience, Jack. Isn't that
There
the
you
loop-
go.
Isn't that the loophole of this whole discussion, Jack? Why we're
Yes.
even having it is
Exactly.
no, but it's a loophole. I feel like it's a tragic loophole that we have to even discuss it because we're having this. I mean, the pure thought of what we discuss is that what is, and why would we
Exactly.
even be discussing it? So that's our loophole, is that it's the human experience. And with that becomes all kinds of character defects and other things. But Anthony does that to get attention, to connect, to, remind himself that we're here. Even if we get it, it doesn't bring happiness or lack of depression.
To connect or to get other things and feel fulfilled is to admit we don't think we're connected and that we're not fulfilled.
Correct.
And while you can talk about that essence, Anthony, you don't act like that essence is your essence. And the point of this discussion, if there is a point, and if it's worth making a point, is to begin to notice that we've been acting maligned with that reality, to be thinking in ways that accommodate and turn irrational thoughts into reason and misunderstanding.
And the word align has the lie in it. Aligned.
Okay. Anthony,
lie in the word.
Anthony, can one, and I'm trying to figure this out too as I say this to you. Now that we've established that you do see that there's human suffering, and you have two choices. Once you can concede that there's human suffering, I think that we have two choices. We can either serve self, which is trying to get as much attention as possible,
that sounds good,
or focus the attention on and try to address the human suffering.
But the idea, Everett, that you have a self that is served by getting more attention is trying to reinforce the idea. You know that there's no amount of attention that you'll ever get that will confirm that self.
I agree, and so
we're getting back to this delusional idea about self. So ultimately, I would say in the absolute nature of nature, there is no suffering. But our human experience, it's kind of like we've decided to play a game. And the game is got certain rules.
Yeah.
And the winners and losers of that game either play by the rules effectively or try to cheat to win. And we've been cheating. We've been cheating our own experience. We've been cheating each other. We've been making believe all kinds of things that aren't true are true because we simply make believe in them. And probably the overarching issue here, if there is one, and if it's worth talking about, is that it isn't, if we're arguing over things, we're arguing over the things we think we're thinking. But if the problem is in this idea that we're not thinking what we're thinking to be causing those suppositions that we rely on as the basis for our beliefs and our arguments, then beginning to notice that this seeming subconsciousness, our awareness of it is in fact the conflict and the readiness to fight and the readiness to be reactive and irritated and disillusioned by others. It's starting to notice that that conflict is actually operating between us, and it's coming from this idea, I'm not even thinking what I'm thinking because what's happening shouldn't be happening. And as a result, I shouldn't be thinking what I'm thinking, and I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And all of a sudden I need to set off on this crusade trying to be the person I can never become, because I'm denying the things I'm actually choosing to do now in the most responsible, accountable way. So if we were thinking in those terms and talking in those terms, we would probably be offering insight rather than challenging, offering the insight that's inspired the intuition, the wisdom that comes from that. And I don't know that I do that much, but I know that my process and my experience as a human with great failings, plenty of proof of that, plenty of evidence, is to begin to actually address that in a way that expresses that intuition and expresses that wisdom and expresses that inspiration. And my sense is those three are the holy trinity, while defense, denial, and delusion is the sort of unholy trinity that we talked about.
Isn't it weird that you say my sense is, like you have one sense? You don't say my senses tell me, you say my sense is.
Well, the greater sense is the culmination of all those things. Like the moment now is the culmination of everything happening.
That I want to
That's not my alarm.
That's how scary movies start.
Jack,
Yes.
I want to say something and I need your help, okay? If 90% of our thoughts, pensamientos, are negative, and we have 6.000 thoughts daily, every day, including the night before. If those thoughts are not real, so that will impact on how we act, how we behave. And that is why people are suffering. Because if we think that we are behaving right, or this is my reality, that is the problem that we have. How we behave is, so we need to notice, we need to start noticing that, because
the behavior is all coming out of the thinking, though. We don't do anything voluntarily that doesn't start with a thought. Every time you do anything voluntarily, it's starting with a thought. And if the thought's corrupt, the behavior is naturally going to be corrupt.
Exactly. And that is the problem that we have.
Yes, I would say.
That is the problem that we have. And the most hard part is when we believe that I'm doing great and we see people suffering around us. And that is that is what made me cry. Because sometimes we behave and we are stuck like 100% sure that I am right. I'm living my life. I'm so happy. And that is not true. That is absolutely a lie. Yeah. And we need to.
And you're moved by that, Lenses. You're moved by that. I can sense you're moved by that.
Yeah.
There's emotion moving through you. And it doesn't particularly feel beautiful, except to notice, I'll tell you the beauty in it, is the compassion and the awareness. Here's where we, in my estimation, have gone wrong. We think those people who are suffering, we need to fix them and we need to help them, rather than begin to help us self-understand they already have the dignity. We've been stripping them of the dignity to do for their own experience what they're capable of doing, given the absolute nature of their knowing. And I know that there are some people that are mentally defective to a point that maybe they can't recover. Let's segment that as a possibility. And yet, if the infinite source is capable of everything that's happening, certainly healing of things that we think are impossible would become possible very quickly.
Isn't it also incapable of it if it's capable of it?
Anthony, could you let the direction just go until we get to the end before you try to break it down?
No.
Okay. Then please participate rather than interfere with the process.
Yeah.
Just let a point be made. Let's come to a cycle as individuals, maybe mature
There you go with that
individuals.
point again.
Jack?
Some maturity might be evidenced in allowing a process to occur. We're humans having a process. We are doing that as humans. Doesn't mean that's the totality of existence. It doesn't mean it's reality. It means that's what we're experiencing as humans.
Sorry.
Jack,
to
bring you back what you were just talking about with there's some people who are, let's say, mentally there's a lot of mental you see a lot of people roaming the streets and talking to themselves and and seem to be suffering from major mental illness, like that don't seem as if that they can take care of themselves. Like, what about them? Like,
but again, rather than try to pick the group that we think is impossible, that's why I segregated. I don't think there is any segregation ultimately. I don't think there's any point ultimately. I don't think any of those things really exist. But within the human dynamic, I think it's worth noting that if you never ate, you'd probably starve. And if I decided because there was no point that I was going to make sure you never ate, I would probably be participating in your demise and your experience and your potential to be able to serve others and to offer yourself in some, or not even offer yourself, but offer something of value to others.
Yes.
Follow? So if I segregated it simply because as soon as anything broad, my experience is when these broad concepts begin to be discussed, immediately there's a latching on what can't happen, what won't happen, etc. Rather than see, it's those thoughts that are condemning those people out there to that eventuality that we think we want to help, and we can't even help ourselves in our own thinking to imagine that they have sufficient dignity because we're not thinking we have that either.
Exactly. And love is very important, and not condemnation. It's so important to walk with love. That is
but to say you are and still be thinking in contemptful terms because we think our thinking is reality, we're actually just creating a new veneer that looks good and says all the right things to look good so that we can look good to other people and say, I'm doing this, while in fact we're literally harboring in what we would call a safe harbor, but it isn't safe because secrets secrete through our physical experience. The anxiety and stress that we have are great evidence of that. The blood, sweat, and tears that we impose or create and induce are also evidence of that. If we're doing those things and making believe we're not doing those things while we're coming up with these grand illusions, these new grand illusions of love is everything, and not noticing, wait a minute, I'm not acting very loving in a lot of the thinking I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I'm not participating at that level in my essence in terms of my thinking. That may be my essence, but I am not thinking that way when I am pitifully thinking about other people and hold them in contempt. And if I watch my thoughts honestly, I have 4 thoughts of people all day long. I have thoughts of people that are not healthy all day long. I see them as distinct and different and doing things that I wish they weren't doing, when in fact I can't even admit the things I'm doing that I wish I wasn't doing because I keep wishing and hoping someday they'll come true.
Good job, Jack.
Yeah.
So if there's a purpose here, it would be to start to have that conversation and somewhat unmask these ideas of, yes, there's an absolute source. Are we operating on it? I would say we're operating on a delusional basis most of the time to make believe that our thinking has any basis in reality. And then to realize thinking definitely has a basis in reality, but what I think about my thinking is far from that, can often be far from that. And I think of what I think about my thinking and my fixed beliefs and these belief systems and all that as reality. They aren't. They're just simply thoughts. And they are flexible all the time. If they are always new, they are always flexible. They are never entrenched. They are never old. We think of them as old ideas because we've repeated them so long. We can think of them as some history that we think can't be undone. The same way we can think of those people out there, Everett, and imagine that there's a group of them that can't be helped. Because if that group is as big as it is today, we've been thinking that group can't be helped at all, including those who are well within reach of being helped. We've dismissed them all for the sake of making believe it's them and not us, and not what I'm thinking, and my lack and my inability to be embracing of engaging with the absolute inclusive nature of everything being everything all the time. That's a thinking problem on my part, not a being problem on any of our part. But if we have the being and all we're relying on is more thinking about the thinking, we're going to dysfunction in that same overreactive, impulsive, and compulsive manner. And the ultimate compulsion is forcing people to suffer without need and thinking we're helping them by doing for them what they're absolutely capable of doing. we're thinking we're helping and serving people. We're not serving them at all. We're not serving their interests because we're making believe they can't do it without us. We again are God, doing for them what they can't do for themselves. Harry, you look great. I've never seen you in a suit.
Oh no, thank you. I'm actually at work. I'm still listening to you guys. Nice to see you, Everett.
Ay, caramba. Are you in Chicago?
Thank you. Yeah, in Chicago.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I know.
If I looked like that, I'd have my camera on too.
Can I share something with you, Jack?
Please.
Because you know what happened to me 2 years ago happened in LA. You know, and I always think about California. Like I actually talked about this with Everett about a year ago, that I miss California. Like I want to go back. But I'm also, every time I think about it, I get very anxious. And because everything happened there. It's like going back to where everything happened. Seeing the places where I was just crying, where I just even the hospital that I went to, it just creates a lot of anxiety. And today, and actually last night, I was thinking about going back by the end of the year, and I woke up with a big headache. It's just I'm actually, but I'm the one creating all this. It's, I don't know if it's gonna happen again, but I'm actually the one thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'm actually creating negative thoughts, and that negative thought gives me a lot of anxiety, a headache.
But your ability to notice them, Harry, is the beginning of dissolving them. Being honest about that, talking about that. The other thing too is it wasn't LA that everything happened. It was everything around your body.
Yes, happened. I know. And then I actually thought about it too. And everything it happened years ago. Yeah. But when the thing popped, it popped in LA.
So consider that it's the same thinking with new circumstances that may not be identical, but the base root of it is thinking that thinking is real that you struggle with. And the idea that the surroundings would cause you to refeel that is also an admission that you really don't feel fully responsible for it. You think the buildings and the sidewalks and the people would
awesome. Yeah.
Would cause it again.
Yeah. Yes. Even the place that I used to work at, it just gives me a lot of it creates a lot of memories in that's where everything happened.
So you remember a couple of weeks ago you were talking about keeping things under the carpet because you thought if you kept them under the carpet it gave you some reassurance that you could hide things.
Okay. I used to play with it too.
Yes, but when you played with it, it gave you some sense of reassurance that you were the one involved in that.
Yes.
So consider the witness of those feelings you're having that seem so scary. If you weren't ready to face them, you wouldn't be experiencing them. They would overwhelm you just like you were overwhelmed before, where you actually were incapacitated. You were almost incapacitated.
And this is the first time that I share with anyone about this. Yes. No one knows about this. It's just, but lately, about 2 weeks ago, every time I would think about Southern California or the places where I used to live, my mind would just go. My mind would just create it would create negative thoughts. It would just go dark. But lately,
your brain isn't doing that on its own.
I was doing that. I realized that. Yes. I realized that 2 weeks ago, because you know why? I was too busy at work, and I'm like, wait, there's no time for me to be so negative. Where are my thoughts? Where are they?
Apparently, there is time.
Harry, what you're talking about is the same thing that I experienced with Long Beach. Long Beach was where my bottom was. I'm not saying that LA was your bottom. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But I remember when I was looking down, I was like, I had another freaking relapse, and I said I gotta call Jack, and I was scared about calling Jack because I thought he wouldn't love me if I did. And I told him I relapsed. I was scared that he was going to be disappointed And I said, but I also knew that I had to like say, I had to come clean. And then that's when, and I called him. I remember looking down at the pavement when I was saying it, and I was like, and I was feeling really, really low. And he said, Everett, I'm going to love you whether you drink or don't drink, and, but point being is the thought of going to Long Beach even now, and I really appreciate what you just said, Jack, about it's just me not taking accountability that these are my thoughts. It's not Long Beach, the place. It's me and my thinking, my sick thinking. But when I think of Long Beach, it actually scares me. Like if we were to like go to Long Beach, like we have to pass through Long Beach right now, I would have that emotional distress that I think that you're saying right now, Harry.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to take it a step further. If either of you were back to the places that you're imagining caused the fear, that fear would not be as great as the fear you're creating in the imagination right now. Because the fact is, the place is not imbued with that. Your thoughts are imbued with that.
Yeah.
And if you think, Everett and Harry, you have images connected to that because the experience you had, all thinking comes with a narrative. It comes with images because it's imagined. So if you're at a hospital, you see the buildings, you see all of that as interrelated, but now you're seeing it from memory. You're not seeing it there. You're not seeing it where it actually is. You're seeing it from a presumed state of brain thoughts, right?
Yeah.
The anticipation. Yeah. Have you ever gone to the dentist and really worried about getting a tooth fixed or something? And then when you get it fixed, it's never quite as bad as you imagined?
Yeah.
Imagination will take you as far as you can possibly go in any direction.
I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you remember. I couldn't be left alone. I didn't want to be alone. Remember, I used to go one time. I used to. Remember, I told you I actually got a hotel room just to be by myself. But the first time, I just couldn't do it. I left. I didn't want to be by myself. But then the second time, I just stayed there, and it seems like my fears just went away.
Today, now, if you're looking at them and you're talking about them, you are beginning to admit your own readiness to look and see. And when we look honestly, we see what's there. When we look dishonestly, we pretend what's there isn't there. And it sets off a whole cavalcade of other fears because we know we're operating on that old delusional rationalization and justification of how things should be, but how they're not.
And then I always had bad memories about LA, but about 2 weeks ago, what I'm just talking about, finally, I actually started to see the good things about LA, good things that I went through.
Like the Dodgers?
Oh yeah, I know Dodgers. They won twice, 2-0. I know. And then I actually started to feel love again, love about LA.
Yes.
Love about everything. I mean, like real love. I actually had a dream about it too.
Love is real, by the way.
Yes, and it felt great. Yeah, it felt great. But thank you, Jack. I want to thank you, and Everett. Thank you for actually getting so because you're the reason why I'm here, Everett. Because you got me.
You're the reason. You're the reason why you're here. But I know what you're saying. But you're the reason why you're here.
But it's great appreciation to appreciate the process and appreciate the involvement of people. And we're all playing a role and a part, and we're hoping to get attention, but we're doing things that are not attractive. They're distracting. They're trying to take away from what's happening and trying to re-manipulate it in some new way rather than just let it be, notice it, live with it. Let the emotions that give me the impulses to get up all the time and be busy all the time, just sit with it. And as I do, the clarity and the insight becomes this beautiful panorama of awareness that's absolutely always been intact. I've just been obliterating it with the preoccupation of thought, thinking it's real.
But I just want to say, I'm sorry. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I love you.
Thank you for your honesty. I wish I could be that honest. If I was ever as honest as that, dude, I would be a different person.
No, it took me a while to be like this. So Avery knows. Actually, he knows you better.
Harry used to be quiet and totally to himself.
No way.
Yes.
I don't believe it.
Totally to himself. Really
people
stoic.
perceive it as an alpha male. Remember, Everett?
Oh yeah, I was talking to Jack about that yesterday. By the way.
Yes, that was funny, but I was never an alpha male. I was just like this.
No.
I was just a shy guy.
Wow.
All the time.
I'm not buying that.
But
buddy.
I say that though, he was also the banquets manager. He was always in positions of authority.
Hey, let's all send him positive energy. If we just take a minute and breathe. The problem is when you're nervous, you stop breathing. Like we're the only place where you have to learn breathing. If you would just take big breaths.
I know. Every time I get anxious, my breathing stops.
Just take a big breath right now. We'll watch. Just take a big in and out. Serious. It's not funny. This is serious. You got to breathe.
Yeah, I
bro.
know.
Take a big breath.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Harry.
See you. Love you. Love you guys.
Love you too, man.
Thank you so much. Love you.
I could
Nice
never
seeing
be
you,
that honest.
Sorry.
Love you.
Yeah.
Right? It feels good to say I could never be that honest. Like just to admit it. I'll never be that honest, right?
All right. Great conversation today, guys. I'm gonna take off as well.
Thanks. And me too. I've got a schedule.
Hey, Jack, do you have a minute after just to talk or no?
Maybe later in the afternoon. I've got a memorial for a friend of mine.
Jack, I want to say something before I go.
Okay.
The most beautiful thing of this meeting that you are having,
I could still hear you guys talking about me,
is to see the transformation. I would call that transformation. I'm so happy hearing the before and the after. I admire people who become vinieron from a very hard experiences in life.
Yes.
They notice.
Yes.
I understand this, and I'm noticing this. This is not what I want, or this situation that made me feel depressed or unhappy, and let me drink more and let me do crazy thing more to escape. But the most beautiful thing is to hear these kind of histories or experiences. So I'm so happy being here. I'm so happy. I'm learning. I understand many things.
I want to mention to you too, Lenses. Well, we're well past the time that we set to talk, but I want to mention this while we're here.
Yes.
Your witness of those things and other people and your appreciation for them is the beginning of acknowledging the struggles that you've been through and the things that you have thought you put behind you as though you could push them down and keep them from you, when in fact they've been weighing on you. And there's typically, in my experience, emotion attached to that. There's sadness, there's frustration, there's anguish, there's all kinds of emotive capacities that aren't being expressed to relieve that. And we're designed to relieve that. We're perfectly designed to allow that to flow through us as quickly as we can imagine it.
Yes.
And that I saw you moved earlier and you're talking about it. And I know that you like to talk about beauty, but there's nothing more beautiful in my experience than that honest concession. Because in the midst of it, there's a radiance and an awareness that, as Harry said, that he saw the love. He just knew that knowingness, that awareness. It just because it doesn't come from us constantly kicking and screaming against the flow, but starting to say, wow, I have been compassionate about these things since as far back as I can remember, felt something was seriously wrong. Sobriety helped me realize the wrong I was seeing, but seeing more clearly, I can see the wrong we're all doing a little better. And it hurts to see that. It hurts to witness that. And it hurts to think there's nothing I can do about it because I know better than that. I know there's something I can do. I know there's something we can do. If we are capable of creating such depraved conditions, we are certainly capable of not creating depraved conditions. And that would be to create radiant, absolutely inspired, intelligent results that are possible for all of us. We simply don't talk about it, so we don't act on it. And to act on what we think is good and all that, when it isn't good, is the same crazy thinking we did when we were at our worst and thinking now we're better. We're not better to think we're better, that our only gauge for better is what was worse. That's a pretty sick notion, rather than an awareness that's so pure, so absolute, so ever ready, so available, so awesome.
Exactly.
There's no way to not notice that something's happening that I couldn't create in my own thinking, but I'm actually expressing by simply conceding it and beginning to express and function on that basis, and know that that's my basis in the most simple way. It's always been my basis. There's never been any point in it, Anthony. But within the human context, our ability to operate addiction-free from the mental addiction is starting to see what we're doing and how we're doing it, and start to notice it and start to actually talk about it, because it will dissipate just like darkness goes away when the light goes on.
Exactly. Yes. I love that.
And my sense is tears are the melting of the iciness that occurs in our bodies, that frozen nature, that numbness of our sentient awareness and our sentient experience.
Yes.
That iciness begins to melt. And it's interesting that tears are salty, like the ocean where icebergs live. So
I shared with Jack yesterday that when Harry and I first were working together, we used to butt heads.
Wow.
I couldn't stand him.
Oh my gosh.
No, it was, and then because of this, I had to look at myself. And then we created a bond that was absolutely beautiful. And then you're a witness on what our relationship is like now. But it was really, it's that sick thinking, you know?
So beautiful.
So when you think you're looking at yourself, just begin to concede that what you're really looking at are your thoughts. It isn't yourself, it's just what you're thinking. And that gives you a great clarity of who you are and what thinking is. Rather than thinking it as I am thinking of myself or to myself, think of that. How is it possible that I could be thinking to myself if myself weren't separate from I? To start noticing what we're thinking about as our thinking is to start to have the chance to actually align our thinking with what's actually happening, rather than what we delusionally make believe is all that's happening. That's the transition. It isn't to say we're not there now. It's to say that the only thinking we're doing about not being there now is born in and nurtured in thought only. It doesn't exist in reality. It exists only in the brains of humans maintaining those thoughts. If I maintain those thoughts and you maintain those thoughts, we may get better talking about this as something we're doing rather than something that's happening to us and we can't do anything about. Love you guys.
Love you.
Doug, thank you for today. Oh my God. So,
you're welcome.
Guys, okay, I need to say something. I'm so proud.
I love you, Lindsay's. I love you, Lindsay's.
I need to go, everyone.
Bye,
I've got a
Jack.
schedule.
Aloha.
Bye,
Thank you for
doggy.
your time.
Bye,
I
dog.
love
That's
you.
not really
Aloha.
there.
We'll
Bye,
continue
imaginary
talking.
dog.
Yes.
Bye, imaginary dog. Bye, phony dog.
Jack.
I love you, Lindsay's.
I love you, Uncle.
I wish I could be as honest as you.
Well, it's okay, Anthony. I don't have, I have love. Okay?
You're so beautiful.
Thank you.